we have a few pieces of cake left, popcorn, drinks.
How you been? How you been?
I'm good. How are you? I had to talk to everybody before I come over and talk to Amy.
Okay. So you can just stay put.
I hear you've had a rough week. I'm sorry.
Well, off and on, couple summers. This summer. Just,
We've had a rough summer.
yeah, it's just one thing after another, just
Yeah.
weird stuff. Whether
Yeah.
the internet is out, or like a flat tire, and then I hit a deer, and
Yeah.
air
Yeah.
conditioning's out. It's just one thing after another.
Yeah.
I'm just tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
peace and quiet and normalcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's even possible.
I know. Well, hang in there.
Yeah.
It's never fun.
And then with Allie sort of starting over again, didn't that Tom tell you that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I was like, okay. So now I get to start worrying about that now too. Because yeah, she's 36, but you know, she's been with this guy for 12 years and
Yeah.
in the house together for 7.
Yeah. It's
But she wants to be married. She wants to.
absolutely.
And he doesn't.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, I'm proud of her for being brave enough to
I am too.
do that.
I am
I
too.
mean, that's,
Because there are people out there that want that.
yes, yes.
And so she'll.
And she said she just, you know, for all these years, she's tried to convince herself that, no, she didn't. She's okay. And then she's like, no, I want to.
Good, good, good. Yeah, they'll both work it out somewhere.
Yeah, and they're really good friends, and they still are. And,
That's good.
and I said, well, that'll stop when you get a boyfriend.
It
And she
will.
said, I don't know if it will.
It will for a while at least. It will for a while at least. So anyway, but I'm glad she found out.
Her brothers are moving today. She doesn't have that much. She's leaving furniture there for him. She's just taking her bed and dressers and vacuum stuff and a few odd things.
Yeah, she probably wants a fresh start.
Oh,
She probably wants a fresh.
Nice. I mean, that would be nice to chuck it all.
Yeah,
Ready to get started? I'd like to welcome everybody out that came to listen to Tom talk this evening. Welcome to the Ararat Ruritan Club. We try to help him sponsor this thing, and I'm not much of a speaker, but anyway, we're glad to see everybody out. Hope Tom does a good job. Tom, he wants to introduce his partner tonight this evening. Thank everybody for coming out and just enjoy it.
Here's you some water.
Thanks, Mike.
Margaret, how long have you been a Ruritan? 43 years. Mike used to says he's been a Ruritan 43 years, and you'll hear Margaret in the back going, I've been one that long too. Anyway, thanks for coming out today. We do these about 3 or 4 times a year. Thanks to the Ararat Ruritan Club for doing this for us. Yesterday they gave away 200 and is 122 of the regular boxes and 109 single boxes of food yesterday. So how about that?
Yes.
You missed out and you could have gone.
So anyway, thank you all for coming. We got Beverly's books here. I have an extra case. I hope you brought some in the car. I hope that's a problem, man. That'd be a great problem to have. Before I introduce the monster that I have created, I want to welcome you. Amy, advance at 1. While we're here today, left click, is we're raising money for the scholarship I started when my parents here passed away a couple of years ago, who Teddy and Ann would know as
Mama Betty and Daddy Eric.
there you go. I'm really glad Ann's in from Richmond. She came all the way to hear you talk. Y'all graduated high school together, so I've been told. I don't know, how much did she pay you to come? Huh? Anyway, I literally grew up with these two, so I like to embarrass them. I'd like to also tell you that Ann and I are both two-time cancer survivors, so I'm really glad Ann's here. I'm really glad Ann's here. When poor old Teddy came home from the hospital, I was already there. So you pity him, just pity him over there. So we started this 2 years ago to do a scholarship to raise money. We've given away 8. I think it's 8. Advance it one more. Here's some of the people that have got these. We've gone to Radford, VCU. We even had one go to cosmetology school. I might need my hair done here one of these days. But here's some of the young people. Next one. Last year we gave it to Macy Hall, Patrick's daughter. Macy's grandma, Margie, was my dad's secretary at Blue Ridge. So I was really glad to do this. Poor old Patrick had been trying to get me to give her a scholarship for about 10 years. I think she was only 5 when he started, it seems like. Next one. We're at East Tennessee State with Irene and Amy's grandson Cole at Western Carolina. And one more, he thinks it's James Bond there. Yeah. And this year it went to Joy and JB's little boy Nate, who's going to Virginia Tech. And I tried to find every embarrassing picture I could find of Nate, and I think I succeeded pretty good there, pretty good. I sat down with Nate to give him his check, and all he wanted to do was talk Hokie football for 3 hours. 3 hours he talked Hokie football. Oh my gosh. So that's who we've given this to. So money today that you donate or buy a book or whatever, we're going to keep it going. Next one. And next one we're going to do here is in September. I'm going to talk about Jeb Stewart because Kevin wants me to. And when Kevin lets you use the building, you do what he wants. But I'm very happy that they allow me to do this. And I've spent my whole life with Jeb Stewart, it seems like sometimes. So we're going to talk about him and his 2 brothers in the war and what they did. And the next one, we're going to bring a new book out then about the legend of Ararat Ridge, which is an old folk tale here in Ararat about a witch. Don't be stealing my ideas and putting them down. I'm watching you. Yeah. Tara Van Sutphen drew that for me. She drew a bunch of illustrations for it. We'll have that out for Halloween. The next one. So, as many of you know, Beverly writes an article for the Enterprise every week, and this book is the first 100 of those, I think it's the first 100 of those stories. And the thing I like about the way she does it is I believe you teach history by telling stories, and she's really good at that. The best compliment I have seen you get is one woman said she'd like to be one of your 6th grade students so she could have you talk about history every day. I thought that's the best compliment I've seen. This book is done remarkably well, and she's going to talk about people in the book that are west of the Dan River, I guess, because I've been harping on her to do that. The thing I like about her book, though, is it's all over Patrick County. You know, it's not just Stewart, it's Big A and Woolwine, the Dan River Queen, McKinley Brim is in this book, Fionn sitting back there. So anyway, Beverly teaches at Martinsville Middle School, and she's going to tell us about Patrick Pioneers. So welcome, Beverly.
Hey.
And Amy will advance your slides. Advance the slide, Amy.
Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I'd like to give a special shout out. I see a lot of faces that I haven't saw in a while, and I really appreciate everybody coming. I want to give a special shout out to my cousins from Utah who are here today on the back row. Rebecca and her children, two of her children, and my sister-in-law Marie, and my husband Mark, and my mama, and my good friends Jean and Linda and Joanne, and just a regular get together. Yeah, if you want to advance next, and we will start with McKenna's ancestors. I just met McKenna, so glad to meet her. What I thought I would do today is just read a little bit from each article. The folks that are from west of the Dan River that I've written about. This was one of my absolute favorite subjects. McKinley Brim. So much admiration for him and his wife Birdie. But I will just, how long do I have?
Till dark.
Oh,
There's a race today.
I can get a little long-winded. Can y'all stand me for 30 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
You talk as long as you want to,
Okay.
because they're all afraid I'll start talking.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna I'll read excerpts from the others, but I wanna read McKinley's story. I wanna read the whole thing, if you guys will bear with me. McKinley Brim was quoted as saying, "If a man quits work, I believe he'd just get no account for nothing. If you retire and have nothing to do, you'll soon die off, get sick and die off." Mr. Brim certainly practiced what he preached. He and his wife Birdie worked hard until their passing, both going to glory at the age of 95. William McKinley Brim was born in Patrick County on December the 3rd, 1897, to Beverly Belcher Brim and Letitia Carter. He was one of 11 children growing up on a tobacco farm in Ararat, Virginia. Birdie was also born in the Ararat community of Patrick County on June 26, 1899. She was the daughter of Anderson Carter and Lucy Smith, and she too belonged to a family with 11 children. In 1978, as part of the Blue Ridge Parkway Folklife Project, researchers and photographers from the Library of Congress traveled up and down the Blue Ridge Mountains recording images and stories from the past. If you just go to the Library of Congress website and just type in McKinley Brim in the search bar, all these pictures will come up of him on his farm. It's just fascinating. Had work on his farm. Plus, the wonderful thing they did was audio recordings, so you can hear him talking. And I really enjoyed listening to his wisdom. And one of the interviews that I listened to, when asked, it was done by Patrick Mullen, and when asked what young people did for entertainment after working in the fields all day, Brim replied, "We would climb up in the cherry tree and eat cherries until dark." He also stated that the young folks would have a frolic at one of the neighborhood homes and someone would pick a banjo. As a young man, Mr. Brim went to West Virginia to find work. He said that he took one look down in those mines and decided it wasn't for him. He did find work cutting cross ties and building railroad lines for a while before returning to the farm of his childhood. During the interview, Mullen remarked on how healthy Mr. Brim's tobacco, corn, oats, and wheat looked, and as if he had any planting advice. Mr. Brim said that he always planted when the signs were in the arms, the twins, and the breast. He warned to never plant when the signs were in the heart or the head. This was not the first time I'd heard an older lady assign body parts to represent astrological signs to signify favorable or unfavorable times to do things such as planting crops or hog killing. It was the belief of my very wise grandmother, and Rebecca, this is your grandma too, that medical procedures should be scheduled when the sign was as far away from the body part as possible. I had some dental work done one time, and it just was a disaster. They had to go back in and do more, and they left splinters and everything, and I told my grandmother, expecting sympathy, and she said, well, you shouldn't have had it done when the sign was in the head. You should have had it done when the sign was in the feet. So, that they really believe in it, and I think there is some truth to this. Mr. Brim said neither he nor his wife saw a doctor while growing up and used the old trusted ways of their mothers when caring for their own children. He said that when their children were sick, they would boil catnip tea or peppermint tea for their children to drink. They would also boil wild cherry tree bark into a syrup when their children had a cough. These methods must have worked very well, as they raised 8 fine children to adulthood, including Mr. Fred Brim, a math teacher and administrator at Patrick County High School, and I dearly love Mr. Brim. I had the honor and pleasure of having a classroom next door to McKinley and Bertie Brim's granddaughter, Benita. Benita recently shared some heartwarming memories with me about her grandparents. As a little girl, I remember Grandpa priming tobacco and the long hours he worked. He also raised sugar cane, and at times he would cut the stalk for us to chew on. We would let him chew on the sugar cane. They processed molasses. My grandmother made fresh molasses bread for everyone. It was always a long day of work for the adults, but everyone enjoyed the time together. Benita recalled, my grandmother was very loving. She took care of the chickens. She did a lot of gardening and cooking. She did not say much, but I remember when I was becoming a young lady, she sat me down and told me that my body was a temple of the Holy Spirit. I didn't understand that fully at the time, but that scripture has always stuck with me. Benita remembered how self-sufficient her grandparents were. They raised their own food in terms of a large garden and killing hogs once a year. I remember a special sweet potato that my grandmother raised, which she called a Spanish potato. Y'all ever heard of that? Spanish potato? They used to dig up sassafras root and yellow root, both of which were good for stomach issues. The yellow root was very bitter, but the sassafras had a pleasant taste. Benita's grandparents lived very simply, but nature provided everything they needed right on their land. In the summer, they had old Concord grapes, white grapes, apple trees, plums, and cherry trees. It was out on the land they showed us how to harvest wild berries and suck on honeysuckle blossoms. They showed us how to appreciate the land that God had given us. And the next slide. Now this is the Friends Blue Ridge Mission Academy. This has always been very confusing to me because in the late 19th century there were 3 schools in Patrick County that had Blue Ridge as part of their name. There was the Blue Ridge Institute, which started in 1887 by Professor G.W. Owens, and it was in Vesta. Then there was the Blue Ridge Mission School, which was started in 1916 by the Virginia Baptist Association, and was in Woolwine. And then the Blue Ridge Friends Mission was started in 1888 by the Religious Society of Friends, the Quakers, and was located in Ararat, the Hollow. In 1885, William Sawyers purchased an acre of land from William Mankins and built a store building on the property. Shortly after, while attending federal court in Danville, Sawyers contracted typhoid and died. Jefferson Moore and Captain John W. Gates, I'm sure that name's familiar to a lot of you, Captain John W. Gates purchased the store building from Sawyer's estate and began holding revivals, community singings, and Sunday school there. Reverend David Sampson, a circuit riding preacher, was spending the night with a local resident, Hillary Epperson, when the discussion came about the need for a school to educate the children of the Hollow. Well, who was that Hillary Epperson? So I had to find that out. According to records from Patrick County Circuit Court, Hillary Tippett Epperson was born in 1837 to John Daniel Epperson and Lethea Bowman of Ararat. In 1867, Hillary married Miss Matilda Frances Arnold, the daughter of Moses and Margaret Hopkins Arnold of the Dan River District of Ararat. In Tom Perry's book, The Free State of Patrick, Hillary had enlisted with the 6th Virginia Infantry, Company E, in Great Bridge, Virginia, on the 10th of May, 1862. He furnished a substitute and was discharged due to health reasons on the 12th of February, 1863. So apparently we can thank Hillary Epperson for planting the seeds in Reverend Sampson's mind, because the store building was purchased by the North Carolina Yearly Meeting of Friends in 1888. Reverend David Sampson became the superintendent of Friends Blue Ridge Mission, and the school opened its doors on Monday, October the 8th, 1888. And then it just continued to grow and continued to grow, and I'll read you some of the fees right here. This was part of the regulations for school. Any person of good moral character agreeing to conform to the regulations of the school was admitted. All students were expected to attend Sunday school and a meeting for worship each Sunday. Students received instruction in bookkeeping, Latin, botany, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, zoology, elocution, composition, and rhetoric. Monthly tuition was 75 cents. Intermediate was $1.25 and academic was $1.75. In the fall of 1925, Mr. and Miss Elsie Fultz and their 4 children arrived at the campus of Blue Ridge Academy. So that was right before this picture was taken. Mr. Fultz had been employed by the Home Mission Board of the Presbyterian Church. By the late 20s, the school had become a fully accredited high school. During the 1933-34 term, the school and several acres of land were sold to the Patrick County School Board, which became the Blue Ridge School. So that's how we got the Blue Ridge School. So it all started with some Quakers. All right. And then here's some pictures. I wish this picture had a little bit more. That's Buck Barnard in front of one of the pinnacles, in front of one, but I wish it showed how pointed the pinnacles actually were. And then that's the second splash dam, and I just see a typo right here of at Kibler Valley. It was the second one. So Kibler Valley was named for C.W. Kibler, who operated a large sawmill operation in the valley there in the late 1800s. In the early 20th century, a railroad named the Mount Airy and Eastern Railroad, the Dinky, was built to haul timber out of Kibler Valley. For 16 years, the narrow gauge railroad ran a daily trip from Mount Airy to Kibler Valley. And this is what I thought was really amazing, is when the logs were cut, they were floated down the Dan River, just like you see out west, and in Washington State and Oregon. You think about, how did they float these logs down the Dan River? But they floated them down the Dan to the sawmill in Kibler Valley. Logging camps brought a need for mission work, and in 1903, Miss Henrietta and Miss Nanny Rivers started the Danube Presbyterian Church. The little village also had a store and a post office. So the church followed the logging camp, so that was good too. In 1937, a dam was in the works for Kibler Valley as part of Roosevelt's New Deal program. In October of that year, 8 inches of rain fell in the little valley in just a couple of hours. The water rose at tremendous speed and the whole gorge echoed with the roar of water. The cofferdams erected for the pouring of the footing were swept away, as well as 2 bridges on the Kibler access road. The whole Kibler Valley was a seething mess of water, logs, and debris. The farms in the valley were badly damaged to the raging waters pouring down from the pinnacles. The following spring, the land still showed scars of the devastating flood, but plans were underway to have the new hydroelectric dam online. The city of Danville built 4 small houses near the power plant to house the workers and their families. There was a resident superintendent and 3 workers to cover the 8-hour shifts in a workday. Each home was provided enough land to have chickens, cows, and to raise a garden. So I thought that was neat. Now the next one, I had a hard time. I did a story about Mary Dunkley, and I had a really hard time finding any pictures. I never have found any pictures of Mary Dunkley, but she wrote almost weekly, and she was a little girl. She wrote to a newspaper called the Presbyterian of the South. It was formed through the union of 3 newspapers: the Richmond Central Presbyterian, Milledgeville, Georgia Presbyterian, and Southwestern Presbyterian of New Orleans. And it had a circulation of 15,000 people, and it had different things about missionary work and Christian literature. And anyway, this Mary Dunkley from Ararat, she would write weekly, and I really got a kick out of some of the things that she wrote. And also, some of the other children in the community got in on it. And this letter is from Sally Elba Anderson. And Sally Elba Anderson is Merritt Bateman's niece. And I couldn't find any pictures of Miss Sally, but Ella Hall, who's still living, she's still with us, she's 98 years old, she's in the Landmark Center in Stewart. She had some pictures of Merritt Bateman. This is Merritt Bateman with Ella's mama, and there he is with another lady. He didn't marry either one of these ladies, but anyway. Anyway, we kind of get an idea. He probably was a character. Okay. All right, so I'm going to read one of the letters from Sally Elva Anderson to the Presbyterian. Dear Presbyterian, I have never written to you, but I thought I would. I'm a girl of 15 years of age. I go to Sunday school every Sunday I can. I'm in the 8th grade at school. My teacher's name is Miss Mamie Frazier. I like her fine. She is such a sweet girl. I live with my grandma. My uncle carries mail. That's Merritt Bateman. He has a Ford car. Your unknown friend, Sally Elva Anderson, Clawville, Virginia. Sally Elva Anderson was the daughter of John William Anderson and Geneva Alice Bateman of Clawville. And the uncle she mentions is Merritt. Sally Elva Anderson married Walter Green Arrington around 1920. Walter Green Arrington was the son of Robert Andrew Arrington and Sarah Alice Handy, who lived on Dobbins, or Handy Mountain. Some people call it Dobbins Mountain, some people call it Handy Mountain. Is that right, Joanne?
Handy Mountain's how I always knew it.
But they later moved to Little Patrick in Amelia County, Virginia. Sally and Walter remained in Patrick County and still have many descendants there today. And here's another letter to the Presbyterian. A lot of the children got into writing, the community got into writing to the Presbyterian. And here's another one that says, and we don't even know who this is, but we know that they're from Ararat, they're from Clawville. Dear Presbyterian, I am a boy 16 years old. I live with my sister on a farm. We have a store and a Ford car. We have nice times riding. Tootsie and Merritt Bateman went with us. We had a delightful time. I want to surprise my friends, Tootsie and Bobby. I hope to see this in print. Your unknown friend, Clawville, Virginia. And this one is from Exony Emma Clark. And some of you probably remember her brothers, James Hatcher Clark, who lived in Clawville to the age of 90, and Claude Swanson Clark. But here's a letter from Exony. It sort of tells about life in the area at the 1918 time. Dear Presbyterian, I wonder if you would publish a letter for me. This is my first attempt to write your paper. I'm a girl of 16 and I live on a farm. I go to Dunkley's High School and am in the 8th grade. I attend the Bethel Presbyterian Sunday School and belong to the same church, which has just been finished. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. My 2 older brothers are in service, one in the Army and the other one in the Navy. My father is dead. I hope this war will be over soon, so my big brothers can come back home. My youngest brother is 13, so we don't have anybody much to work on the farm. We have 1 horse and 2 cows, 1 hog and 1 pig. I will close now. Your friend, Exony Emma Clark. And does anybody know where the Dunkley High School was in Ararat? So that's something I hadn't been able to figure out. The Dunkley High School?
Dunkley's Claw, as I recall.
Okay, so.
It might be Redback, I don't know.
Yeah. And here's one more from Mary Dunkley. Dear Presbyterian, as you printed my other letters, I thought you would write again. I'm going to school every day. We have a 3-room school. Our teachers' names are Miss Mamie Frazier, Miss Mary Sawyers, and Miss Manny Clark. I like all 3 of them. The name of our school is Dunkley's High School. We have a piano, library, and several pictures of the great men. I'm guessing that's Washington and Lincoln. And a nice teacher's desk. We have a fine school. I went to Stewart Thursday and I came back Saturday. I had a nice time. I'm going to knit some for the soldier's quilt when I get some yarn. I can't get any now. This was November 6, 1918, so right before Armistice. Are you still making the quilts? I go to Sunday school every Sunday. I receive 2 pens for going 3 months and not missing. I know, I'm afraid my letter's getting long. I hope to see it in your good paper. Your little friend, Mary Dunkley. So, alright. And then where we mentioned little Patrick about the Arringtons, you know, you think about little Cicely and little community, but I had never heard of little Patrick until a few years ago, which I thought this was fascinating. It was 1917, and families in Red Bank and Clawville were dealing with the same problems plaguing many people in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The chestnut blight was destroying a source of income that most families needed to survive. Younger generations were finding it difficult to find good land to raise crops on and to feed their families. At the same time, 2 real estate developers had purchased and cut the timber off of 3,400 acres located only 6 miles below Amelia Courthouse. Meigs Aaron, Simon Beverly, and John Walter Bowman had heard about this available land that was cheap and flat. This appealed to the Patrick County bright-leaf tobacco farmers who all lived within 5 miles of each other along the Dan and the Little Dan River. The Aaron, Beverly, and Bowman families were the first ones to leave Patrick County and purchase land along Deep Creek in Amelia County. There were no homes on the recently logged land, and families reported living the first year in sawmill shacks. After the first winter, relatives came to visit, and soon more families from Red Bank and Clawville moved to the settlement known as Little Patrick. Soon, 27 young families of Arringtons, Andersons, Barnards, or Bernards, we always, mountain people say Barnards, Barnards, Dickersons, Dillards, Flippins, Halls, Hills, Lynches, Martins, Mills, Seahens, Smiths, and Stones all called Little Patrick their new home. And then, of course, this right here, they had a farm on Dobbins Mountain. They referred to it as Dobbins Mountain or Handy Mountain, which, you know, you go up 103 and turn at Peters Creek Road where the state shed is, go out that way. And this is their house that was on Handy Mountain. But they all moved, some of the children stayed, but they all moved to Little Patrick in Amelia County, the Arrington family. And he was a minister. Mr. Arrington was a minister. All right. And then there were several newspaper articles about Little Patrick and about the people coming to Patrick County and settling in Amelia County. One of these interviews, what it says is, was with this was in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Mr. Irby Barnard recalled that the Amelia locals said we wasn't gonna make it. We'll starve out within a year. The locals were also mistaken in saying that you couldn't grow bright-leaf tobacco in the area. J.D. Anderson said that about all the bunch realized that you had to feed the land if it fed you. As soon as we could get open ground, the folks started sowing clover and things like that to improve the land. Mr. Sam Lynch said in the same interview, it may not sound so good because we don't like the women to do such rugged work, but I cut brush and my wife piled it. Mrs. Sam Lynch, who was Rosa Thompson from this area, recalled, I helped saw logs for the barns. Most of the other women did about the same. We had choppings to clear the land. Then when anybody wanted any kind of building put up, the neighbors put it up. Money was scarce, and that way everybody helped everybody. Irby Barnard stated that every family in the farming community prospered and that merchants in Amelia and Blackstone had never lost $1 on anybody in Little Patrick. In addition to the bright-leaf tobacco, many families also began raising cattle, beef, dairy, veal, poultry, and hogs. The only thing the little community was missing was a church. One of the first moderators, Bob Arrington, that was the gentleman on the slide before, named it Little Flock Church because it was initially just a small gathering of souls. So 2 communities forever linked by their families and their pioneer spirit. That took a lot of courage to leave and start completely over in the, because they didn't have all the information we have now, and they did well. They did very well. All right. Okay. Now I haven't had much luck finding Gates pictures. I found these at the Historical Society. And what I thought was so interesting about the Gates family was when they first came here from Halifax, is they first settled in Woolwine, and so I thought that was really interesting. On October the 20th, 1827, Thomas Gates purchased 224 acres of land on the waters of Jack's Creek. James and Francis Cheney. This was the first deed for a Gates recorded in Patrick County Circuit Court. So the Gates got here in 1827. Thomas and John Gates must have moved here shortly after this land purchase, because in 1830, the minutes of Jack's Creek Primitive Baptist Church list Tom, William, Martha, Lucy, and Judith Gates. So I thought it was interesting that they started out in Woolwine. John Wesley Gates, who was the first store owner here in Ararat, married Iwanona, I love these names, Iwanona Ayers of Rock Castle on the 11th of October, 1839, and became a very successful merchant in Ararat. They had 7 children. William Gates' grandson, I found this memoir, and I really like this. William Gates' grandson, Joseph Daniel Vaughn, wrote down his memories of his grandfather. Vaughn was 78 years old and was living in Salt Lake City, Utah. So there's Gates out there too, Rebecca. William B. Gates was born in Patrick or Franklin County, Virginia in 1824. He lived about 9 miles north of Mount Airy on the Willis Gap Road. His farm was on Owen or Cistern Creek. Do y'all know where that is? Owen or Cistern Creek? And reached up to the Willis Gap Road at a point known as the High Knob. His wife, Zilpha Ingram's father, James Ingram, deeded her 150 acres of land on Smith River near Franklin County. They lived there until the early 1850s, and then she sold out to her brother. So then all the Gates moved to Ararat and bought 100 acres of land from John Eaton's executor, who was Martin Cloud, for $112. So he bought 100 acres of land for $112. In 1857, he bought the Dotson place adjoining his land. This land was a tract of 150 acres. From Robert and his wife, Amy Clark, he bought more land. All in all, he had over 380 acres. Elder William B. Gates was a Primitive Baptist minister. He was ordained to the Baptist ministry when he was a young man at Jack's Creek Meeting House near Smith River. He always rode a horse in his travels. He was a small man, only 5'6" tall and 145 pounds. He's buried on the Gates farm by his wife's side and some others of his family. The old home is gone now, but some of the buildings remain.
May I say something?
Yes.
William Gates is my great-grandfather.
Huh?
William Gates is my great-grandfather.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that is really neat.
And there's another thing about the Duncan, get back on the Duncan.
Uh-huh.
Duncan's had a place, a home on the corner of what's now called Farmer Road and Lee Hollow Road.
Uh-huh.
And a brick house there, and the Gates live, the Duncans live there. And Billy already lives there now, but anyway, that was the Gates family. I remember, and Pat was a few years older than me, he was one of the, but I remember going back to his mother, I can't think of her name, and his grandmother. But anyway, I think her name was Maddie Gates. Anyway, that was Maddie Duncan. But anyway, they lived on the corner of Farmer Road and Lee Hall Road, and the house still standing.
Now, is that where the Gates Cemetery is?
Ma'am?
Is that where the Gates Cemetery is?
No, it's not. The Gates Cemetery is probably about 2 to 3 miles up the road from there. And I live on part of the old farm, William Gates farm place.
Really? Well, that is really neat.
Gates Cemetery is at the end of Thomas Chapel.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. I didn't grow up in Ararat, so I'm still trying to. I grew up right in Stewart, so not too. So I know some of the landmarks. I went to school with a lot of people from Ararat. Alright. And I got this picture from Shelby Puckett. This was the first, it says the Francis Marion Gates store, but actually his daddy, John Wesley's the one that started the store. That was the Ararat Post Office and Store in 1907. So we'll talk a little bit about Francis's daddy, John Wesley Gates. John Wesley Gates was born in the county of Halifax on the 11th of February, 1817. He was the oldest of 3 children born to Thomas and Sally Gates. Sometime around 1830, John Wesley moved with his parents, his siblings, his uncle and aunt, and first cousins to Patrick County and settled in Jacks Creek area of Woolwine. John Wesley Gates was appointed as a constable for Patrick County on the 13th of September, 1838. He was required to post a $200 bond, and his sureties were Martin Cloud, remember he was the executor on that Gates land, and his future father-in-law, William Ayers. John Wesley and Iwanona's first child, Thomas Virgil, was born in 1845, followed by William in 1847 and James Reed in 1849. In the 1850 census, the family was still living in Rock Castle, and John Wesley's occupation was listed as a merchant. I'm not sure exactly where the family lived in Rock Castle, but in 1847, John Wesley purchased 114 acres on Sycamore Creek for $300, and in 1852, their fourth son, Henry Nebraska Gates, was born, followed by John Franklin in 1855, and then Francis Marion in 1858. By the 1860 census, the growing family had purchased 55 more acres on Snow's Branch, 440 acres on Doe Run, and 330 acres on the Ararat River. Tragedy struck on the 2nd of February, 1862. 17-year-old Thomas Virgil Gates died from a bowel obstruction. Thomas had enlisted in the 50th Virginia, Company K, the previous June. A time for celebration came the following year when John Wesley and Iwanona's son, Davis Beauregard, was born in 1863. The following year, 47-year-old John Wesley Gates enlisted in the Confederate Army at Petersburg and was assigned to the 10th Virginia Cavalry Company E, which I think is really interesting because that's who my husband's grandfather was in the 10th Virginia Cavalry as well. So they were spread out because my husband's people are from Franklin County, and so the 10th Virginia had a good cross-section of people from this area. After the war, John Wesley returned to Ararat and continued to run his dry goods store. When he got old enough, Francis Marion, and if you want to switch a slide, I'll show you a picture of Francis Marion. There's Francis Marion. Francis Marion Gates helped his father manage the business. In March of 1882, his father, John Wesley Gates, was appointed the chairman of the Patrick County Board of Supervisors. 67-year-old Iwanona Gates passed away in September of 1888, and she, according to the death records I found of Patrick County, she died of a tumor on her side. John Wesley Gates remarried on the 1st of October 1891 to Miss Fanny Martin of Nelson County. He was 74 and she was 27. In 1892, their daughter, Martha Francis, was born, followed 2 years later by their son, George Dotson Gates. John Wesley Gates passed away on March 24th, 1898. He was 81 years old. Alright, so we'll stay on this slide for another minute. Now, Francis Marion Gates helped his father run the store for over 50 years. They dealt in groceries, dry goods, boots, shoes, hats, tinware, glassware, and tableware. Francis Marion Gates married Miss Alice Victoria Scott, and she was the daughter of Wolford Scott and Eliza Jane Gillum of Medizzanan. Francis Marion and Alice Scott Gates had 4 children: Davis Herman, Nellie, Arthur Marion, that's Dr. Gates, and Garriott Hobart Gates. For the rest of the presentation, we'll focus on Dr. Gates. And Dr. Gates is the little fella here in the middle. All right, Dr. Gates. And I have to give Mama credit for this. Mama said, Mama's always giving me ideas for stories. And she said, you know, yeah, I got somebody good for you. And I said, who's that? She said, Dr. Gates up in Ararat. And so and she was right. I found out a lot of interesting stuff, and I really got interested in his family when I found out how they, started out in Woolwine and then migrated over this way. But this, of course, this is Dr. Gates and his wife. Arthur Marion Gates, Dr. Arthur Marion Gates was born in 19th of December, 1891 in Ararat, Virginia. He graduated from Woodlawn High School in Woodlawn and then earned his bachelor's degree from Roanoke College in Salem. Dr. Gates received his medical degree from the Medical College of Virginia at Richmond in 1919. On the 3rd of October, 1919, he married Miss Maybelle Alline Lowry of Chesterfield County, Virginia. The young couple had met in college where she was training as a nurse. Dr. Gates practiced medicine for a year under the direction of Dr. S.A. Cundiff of Mount Airy before going out on his own. On the New Year's Eve, 1920, Dr. Gates and Maybelle's first child, Arthur Marion, was born. Their son, Stuart, was born in April of 22, and followed by Lucille in 24, Phyllis in 28, and Horace Lowell Gates in 1931. In addition to bringing more than 5,000 babies, including a set of triplets, into the world over the 37 years that Dr. Gates practiced medicine, he also served as the official coroner for Patrick County. So I can imagine what a stretch that would be to have to travel all over Patrick County in the early 20s and 30s. For the entire time Dr. Gates practiced medicine in the Hollow, he also operated a telephone company with lines ranging throughout the mountain for more than 160 miles. A losing business, he never made money on it. He kept the telephone service in operation because he felt the service was needed for his many patients and neighbors. He also owned a radio station, WYVE out of Whitfield, which his oldest son Arthur managed. Dr. Gates and his family attended Blue Ridge Presbyterian Church and were active in Blue Ridge school activities. On the 4th of July, 1955, Dr. Gates passed away, and I'll read a little bit about his obituary here. Dr. Arthur Marion Gates, Virginia physician and civic leader, died at 8 o'clock Monday, July the 4th at his home in Ararat, Virginia. Dr. Gates' death was sudden and a great shock to the people of the community, which he served for so many years. Funeral services for Dr. Gates will be held today at 2 o'clock at the Blue Ridge Presbyterian Church by Reverend Granville Gwynn and Reverend Glenn Williams. His young son, Corporal Horace Gates, was in Germany at the time of his father's death and will be unable to attend the funeral. The doctor had suffered a heart attack in his office 2 weeks before, but the need for his services was so great that he continued to work. He was actually attending a patient, he was taking care of a patient when he had the second heart attack that killed him. Dr. Gates served the citizens of his mountain community for more than 37 years. He was known to have traveled 48 hours at a time without rest, attending to his patients for a 25-mile radius of Ararat, Virginia. His services often were extended beyond Hillsville and Dobson, North Carolina. His death is a great loss to the community, as he was the only active country doctor who served in the area. And Maybelle actually she outlived him, and she outlived 2 of her children, and she passed away in 1980 at the age of 83. So that's sort of a little microcosm of the people of Ararat. And does anybody have any questions or comments? Or WYVE out of Withful.
What year was that?
Let's see. Well, his son ran it, so probably in the 60s and 70s. WYVE out of Withful, which was managed by his oldest son, Arthur Jr.
Was that before Ralph Epperson had Mount Airy?
Probably before PAQ. Now, I do know about WPAQ. My daddy never, oh boy, he loved all that bluegrass.
Well, are you gonna do a feature about Ralph Epperson
Yeah, I need to, don't I?
and his family? I tell them they need a mural of him in Mount Airy. You know, WPAQ, WSYD, and, you know, I think they need one.
Yeah, yeah, I know, we listened to the Ralph Epperson many a Friday nights. Yeah.
I just want to say, it's way back in one of the ones towards the beginning, there were some hatchers in there. But you spoke of Exony.
Exony Emma Clark.
Okay, well, our great-grandmother Hatcher, who was a good from Franklin County, was Exony, but we pronounced her name Exony. We gave that, you know, it's Exony. So I don't know if there were two different pronunciations.
Well, probably, yeah.
Exony.
Yeah, and I noticed on some of them, and you know, that was a really common name in the 1800s. There's EXONIE and EXONY. There's several of those. But,
Amy, back that up one. So, Beverly, in 1959, my mom and daddy moved to Ararat so he could teach at Blue Ridge. They lived in a little brick house, a little block house right here next door to this building. Dr. Tullis had his office, I think, here later. But Dr. Gates lived next door. This is Dr. Gates' house right here next door to us. So I love telling this story. I tell this story not too much, probably. But Mrs. Gates ran the telephone service. And my mother, every Sunday, would call her sister in Augusta, Georgia, and talk to her for an hour. And when she said goodbye to her sister, she said goodbye to Mrs. Gates, because Mrs. Gates was always listening. And Mrs. Gates got mad at my mama and wouldn't talk to my mama for a long time because my mama knew she was listening in. So, but that's her. That's my mama's arch nemesis right there. She is. Anybody else? Somebody else? Yes.
My mama was delivered by Dr. Gates, and she actually has a variation of her name. She's Mabel, and she's named after Mrs.
Yeah.
But she lived in Mount Airy. They lived in Mount Airy. So he went down there.
I was delivered by Dr. Gates at home.
Yep.
All 5 of us children in the family delivered.
All 5 of you. Wow. I wonder if he played rook.
Dr. Gerald trained under Dr. Gates.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Dr. Gerald, of course, trained under Dr. Gates here next door.
Yeah.
And Fedor and Dr. Gerald were both in the Navy in World War II, and Dr. Gerald was a Marine medic in World War II, but he trained under Dr. Gates here next door.
Dr. Gates delivered my first husband at home in Pine Ridge, or Mount Airy. But he misspelled his name, and we didn't catch it until Dennis went to sign up for Social Security.
Oh, no.
And his still being DENNIS, it's supposed to be, he named him DINNEY.
Oh, no, that was a big difference.
Yeah, we had time getting that straightened out.
So he wasn't a good speller, was he?
He brought me in the World too.
He did?
Yes, he did.
Dr. Gates was a legend.
Wow. Did anybody know the triplets that he did, were they Watkins? The triplets that Dr. Gates delivered? Were they Watkinses or something? Did you just want to say something, Mr. Edwards? Yeah, I've already got 30 stories for the next one. Got some what? Some puckets and some what?
Bowmans.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, any ideas, anything you guys want me to try to research? I love to, this is what I love. One of my friends said, well, I seen you on TV, you're famous now. And I said, well, I don't want to be famous, but I want the people in this book to be famous. That's what I want. I want those people in that book to never be forgotten. Because all of them were just regular people, but they did extraordinary things. They did absolutely amazing things, especially with what they had to work with. And I'm just in awe of all of our ancestors and all it took just to put food on the table every day.
Let me tell you you mentioned Mr. Glenn Williams preached at Dr. Gates's funeral. He might be interesting to you. He had 5 churches. He had this church up here, Danube that you mentioned, Bethel that you mentioned. He also had the Clovel Church, which is Mary Horner Walker, and Unity, I think. He had 5 at one time. So he carried that many churches, he and his wife. So he did a lot for this whole area while he was here. He was Presbyterian.
So were they on the circuit?
Yes, he would do 2 churches one Sunday and 3 churches another Sunday. So he had like a 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 2 o'clock. And he did all 5 of those churches for several years.
And somebody else I've made a note that I want to write about is the mail carrier, George Gwynn.
There's his grandchildren right
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, I think he would be a good one.
Pictures we got.
Pictures we have.
So me and you will Facebook back and forth if you want to. So I think he would be a really good one. So if you guys have any that you want me to research and to put in the next book, just reach out to me. I've got my number and my email, or you message me on Facebook, or because we need to get these stories out, because if we don't, they're going to be gone. They're going to be forgotten. And they definitely deserve to be remembered. Yes, sir.
The only reason we buy the Enterprise because you're a pioneer. I love it. We love it.
Well, thank
The
you.
only reason I buy the Enterprise.
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm serious.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you. That's sort of, I started doing that in honor of my cousin Evelyn. She wrote the Mountaintop Party Line, and for 34 years. And so I asked Debbie, I said, I want to keep her legacy going. What about writing about just local people in the paper? And she said, well, we'll give it a whirl, see what happens. And so it's really grown.
What was her name?
Huh?
What was her name?
Evelyn, she was a Hilton, and then she married a Belcher, and then she married a Reynolds after that.
Okay, so who was the Jemima Casey?
Yeah, she wrote for the paper too, years ago.
I remember her with you.
Was it Maybell? And Maybell up here wrote a, who's visiting who article.
Oh, yeah.
Maybell wrote
Yeah.
that.
Well, every community, if you go back to the papers in the 50s, every community had a report. That was sort of like their Facebook, I guess, And Round the Mountain News was one, and there was one for Dotson, which is up next to Elamsville, and Patrick Springs Shuff, which Patrick Springs was Shuff, S-H-U-F-F, and sort of like everybody's Facebook, I guess. But I really appreciate all y'all coming, and thank you so much for the kind words.
So we've got Beverly's books back here. If anybody wants them signed, we've got popcorn and cake, and I really appreciate all of you coming out today. This is a book I'm really proud that I published, and it's doing really well. And I really thank you for coming. And we'll get George Gwynn in the next one there, Theodore. Best story I ever heard on George Gwynn, and I'll let you go home. He's walking up the street in Stewart, and he looks up the street, and here comes Harry Bird, and who was the attorney? Lawrence Burton and Harry Bird are walking down the street, and Lawrence Burton says to Harry Bird, says, "Oh Lord, we got to cross. There's George Gwynn. He's the biggest Republican in Patrick County." And Harry Bird reportedly said, "Well, that sounds like a fine fella. I want to meet him." I don't know. I wouldn't even love to have heard that conversation, Harry Bird and George Gwynn. But we lived long enough to know George Gwynn. What, he's 76? When he's 67?
67.
So we were 6 or 7 years old when he passed away. He had a Jeep. He always rode around in a Jeep. Took us on rides in the Jeep.
He'd throw candy out to the kids that sit on the yards like a parade and wait for him to come by, and he'd throw candy at them.
And George's house
Any
is
kid-
where
yeah.
Dude Smith lives today. It was a big white frame house right there where Dude lives today. But I remember George very well. Anyway, thank you all. Beverly's got her books over here, and she'll sign them for you, and I appreciate you coming out today.